At 2:15 on April 11, 1942, Lieutenant Commander Bulkley watched a 65-foot Philippine fishing boat pull alongside Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3's dock at Cebu. The boat was called a Bangkas. Wooden hull, single diesel engine, maximum speed 8 knots. The Philippine Navy wanted to convert it into a torpedo boat. Bulkley looked at the fishing boat, then at his PT boats capable of 41 knots, and told the Filipino officer the idea was insane. 3 weeks later, that insane idea would sink more Japanese shipping than any PT boat in the Philippines. If you want deep cinematic World War II history like this, subscribe to No Man's Land, because this is where the real story of the war is told. When Japan invaded the Philippines in December 1941, the United States had exactly 6 PT boats in the islands. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3. 6 77-foot Elco boats with 3 Packard engines producing 1,500 horsepower each. Maximum speed 41 knots. Armament consisted of 4 Mark 8 torpedoes, twin .50 caliber machine guns, and a 20mm cannon. The boats were designed to attack larger warships using speed and surprise. Hit and run. The Japanese had 150 destroyers, 50 cruisers, and 10 battleships in Philippine waters. 6 PT boats against that force was not a navy. It was a gesture. Lieutenant Commander John Bulkley commanded Squadron 3, 30 years old, Naval Academy graduate, professional officer. He had trained his crews for 18 months, practiced torpedo runs in darkness, rehearsed attack patterns, built a unit that could operate at night when larger ships were blind. The problem was simple. 6 boats could not defend the Philippines, could not stop the invasion, could barely harass it. But they would try. By March 1942, the situation was desperate. Manila had fallen. Bataan was surrounded. Corregidor was under siege. American and Filipino forces were retreating south through the islands. Japanese destroyers controlled the waters. Japanese aircraft controlled the skies. The PT boats operated from hidden coves, running supplies to isolated garrisons, evacuating wounded soldiers, occasionally attacking Japanese ships when opportunities appeared. 4 of the 6 boats had been destroyed. 2 remained operational. The Philippine Navy had a different problem. They had men. They had courage. They had no boats. The United States had taken the Philippine Navy's modern vessels south to Australia in January. What remained were fishing boats, inter-island steamers, and coastal freighters. None were warships. But Commander Jose Andrade believed they could become warships. The Japanese were running supply convoys every night. Small freighters, troop transports, tankers. These ships were not heavily armed. A torpedo could sink them. The question was how to deliver the torpedo. Andrade's idea was simple. Take a fishing boat, mount a torpedo tube on the bow, approach Japanese ships at night, fire the torpedo, escape. The concept violated every principle of torpedo boat design. Fishing boats were slow. Wooden hulls offered no armor. Single engines meant no redundancy. If the engine failed, the boat was dead. If the torpedo missed, the boat was dead. If Japanese return fire hit anywhere vital, the boat was dead. The Philippine officers called it suicide duty. The Japanese would call the crews suicide skippers. Bulkley listened to Andrade's proposal at a meeting in Cebu on April 11, 1942. The meeting took place in a warehouse near the waterfront. Present were Bulkley, 3 Philippine Navy officers, and 2 American torpedo men who had escaped from Cavite Naval Base. Andrade explained the plan. Convert fishing boats to torpedo boats. Use them against Japanese convoys. The Philippine Navy would provide crews. The Americans would provide torpedoes and technical expertise. Bulkley thought the plan would get everyone killed, but the Philippines were being lost. Desperate measures were the only measures left. The first problem was finding suitable boats. Philippine fishing boats came in dozens of designs. Some were too small, some were too slow. Some had wooden hulls too weak to handle torpedo recoil. Andrada needed boats between 60 and 80 feet long with diesel engines producing at least 60 horsepower. The boats had to be seaworthy enough to operate in open water at night. They had to be expendable because most would not return from their missions. Over the next 3 days, Philippine Navy personnel inspected every fishing boat in Cebu Harbor. They found 12 candidates. 8 were bancas, traditional Philippine fishing boats with outriggers. 4 were kumpit, larger cargo vessels used for inter-island trade. All were civilian boats. None were designed for combat. The Philippine Navy commandeered them anyway. The owners were paid in promissory notes from a government that was collapsing. Most never received payment. The second problem was torpedoes. The United States Navy had Mark 8 torpedoes. Each torpedo was 21 inches in diameter, 16 feet long, and weighed 2,215 pounds. The warhead contained 466 pounds of TNT. Maximum range was 16,000 yards at 27 knots. Minimum range was 3,500 yards. The torpedoes were designed to be fired from tubes mounted on steel-hulled PT boats capable of 40 knots. Firing them from wooden fishing boats capable of 8 knots was not in the design specifications. Chief torpedoman John Martino had worked at Cavite Naval Base until the Japanese bombed it in December. He had evacuated to Cebu with 15 Mark 8 torpedoes, 3 torpedo tubes, and basic maintenance equipment. Martino was 34 years old, 12 years in the Navy. He knew torpedo systems better than anyone in the Philippines. When Bulkley asked if torpedoes could be mounted on fishing boats, Martino said yes. Then he said the boats would probably sink from the recoil. Bulkley told him to make it work anyway. The conversion work began on April 14, 1942. 12 fishing boats pulled into Cebu's municipal dock. Philippine Navy carpenters, American torpedo men, and civilian volunteers started the modifications. They had no blueprints, no engineering drawings, no precedent. They were inventing a new type of warship using fishing boats and salvaged equipment. The work would take 10 days if everything went perfectly. They had 5 days before Japanese forces reached Cebu. The first modification was structural reinforcement. A torpedo tube weighs approximately 400 pounds. A loaded Mark 8 torpedo weighs 2,215 pounds. Total weight, 2,615 pounds, concentrated on the bow of a boat designed to carry fishing nets. The bow deck would collapse without reinforcement. Philippine carpenters installed additional deck beams under the bow. They used hardwood salvaged from destroyed buildings. Oak, mahogany, whatever they could find. The beams were bolted through the hull with steel brackets fabricated from destroyed trucks and automobiles. The torpedo tube installation required precision mounting. The tube had to be aligned perfectly with the boat's center line. Any deviation would send the torpedo off course. Chief Martino supervised the installation personally. He used a surveyor's transit to align each tube. The work took 6 hours per boat. They had 12 boats, 72 hours of alignment work. Martino divided the work among 3 teams. Each team worked 12-hour shifts. The installation continued day and night. The firing mechanism was the next challenge. PT boats used electrical firing systems. Push a button, close a circuit, fire the torpedo. Fishing boats had no electrical systems beyond basic engine ignition. Martino designed a mechanical firing system using a lanyard pulled by hand. The system was crude but reliable. Pull the lanyard, release the firing pin, compressed air launches the torpedo. No electricity required. The system worked in testing. Whether it would work in combat remained unknown. Defensive armament was minimal. The boats had no machine guns, no cannons, no armor. The Philippine Navy scrounged weapons from retreating Army units. Some boats received .30 caliber machine guns. Some received .50 caliber machine guns. 2 boats received 20mm cannons salvaged from destroyed aircraft. Most boats had only rifles. Against Japanese destroyers with 5-inch guns, rifles were useless. The boat's only real defense was darkness and speed, except they had no speed. The maximum speed problem was unsolvable. The fishing boat's diesel engines produced 60 to 80 horsepower. Maximum speed ranged from 7 to 9 knots. PT boats could do 41 knots. Japanese destroyers could do 35 knots. The fishing boats could not outrun anything. Once detected, they would be hunted down and destroyed. The crews understood this. They volunteered anyway. Lieutenant Ildefonso James commanded the first converted torpedo boat. The boat was designated Q111, originally a 68-foot banca used for fishing off Mindanao. Wooden hull. Single diesel engine producing 75 horsepower. Maximum speed 8 knots. Crew of 8. Armament consisted of 1 Mark 8 torpedo, 1.50 caliber machine gun, and 6 Springfield rifles. The boat carried 200 gallons of diesel fuel. Range approximately 400 miles at cruising speed. 1 mission, maybe 2 if they were lucky. James was 29 years old. Philippine Naval Academy graduate. Professional officer who had trained with the U.S. Navy in San Diego. He had commanded a minesweeper before the war. When the minesweeper was destroyed in January, James volunteered for PT boat duty. The Americans told him they had no boats to give him. When Andrade proposed the fishing boat conversions, James was the first officer to volunteer. He knew the mission was suicide. He commanded Q111 anyway. By April 18, 1942, 8 fishing boats had been converted, Q111 through Q118. Each boat carried 1 torpedo, minimal defensive weapons, and a crew that understood they probably would not return. The Philippine Navy held no ceremonies, no speeches, no flags. The boats simply departed Cebu Harbor at dusk and dispersed to patrol areas along the Japanese supply routes. The first mission began that night. Japanese forces were running nightly supply convoys from Davao to Cebu, small freighters carrying ammunition, food, and reinforcements. The convoys typically consisted of 3 to 5 ships escorted by 1 or 2 patrol boats. The freighters were slow, lightly armed, and vulnerable, perfect targets for torpedo attack, if the torpedoes could reach them. Q111 detected a Japanese convoy at 2340 on April 18th. 3 freighters in column formation, 400 yards between ships. 1 patrol boat leading. James positioned Q111 on a parallel course 2,000 yards from the convoy. The fishing boat's small silhouette and wooden hull made radar detection unlikely. Visual detection was possible but difficult in darkness. James closed to 1,500 yards. The minimum effective torpedo range was 800 yards. Maximum range was 16,000 yards, but accuracy decreased with distance. At 1,200 yards, James turned toward the convoy. The fishing boat's 8-knot maximum speed meant the approach would take 7 minutes. 7 minutes of exposure. 7 minutes during which any Japanese lookout could spot Q111. 7 minutes during which the patrol boat could turn and engage. James held course. The crew was silent. The torpedo was armed. The firing lanyard was ready. At 900 yards, a Japanese lookout spotted Q111. The patrol boat turned toward the fishing boat and opened fire with its forward machine gun. 7.7mm rounds walked across the water, too high. The patrol boat was firing at where it expected a PT boat to be. Q111's low profile meant the rounds passed overhead. James held course, 800 yards. 700. The patrol boat was closing. Its searchlight swept across the water. At 650 yards, Jamis pulled the firing lanyard. The Mark 8 torpedo launched from the tube with a blast of compressed air. The recoil drove the fishing boat backward in the water. The bow deck cracked but held. The torpedo entered the water and activated. Its electric motor spun up to full speed, 27 knots. The torpedo ran straight, depth set for 10 feet. The target freighter drew 15 feet. Perfect intercept geometry. The torpedo covered 650 yards in 42 seconds. The freighter's crew never saw it coming. The torpedo struck the freighter amidships on the starboard side. The 466-pound TNT warhead detonated. The explosion tore a 30-foot hole in the freighter's hull. The ship rolled to starboard. Water poured into the engine room and cargo holds. The freighter was finished. It would sink in less than 10 minutes. Jamis ordered full speed. Q-111's diesel engine screamed. The fishing boat accelerated to its maximum 8 knots, not fast enough. The Japanese patrol boat was closing at 20 knots. The geometry was brutal. The patrol boat would overtake Q-111 in 3 minutes. The patrol boat's forward gun would destroy the fishing boat in the first burst. Jamis had one option left. He turned Q-111 toward a group of small islands 2 miles north. If they could reach the shallows, the patrol boat's deeper draft might prevent pursuit. The patrol boat opened fire at 400 yards. Machine gun rounds stitched across Q-111's stern. One round hit the diesel engine's cooling system. Coolant sprayed across the engine compartment. The engine temperature climbed. The boat was losing speed. 8 knots, 7 knots, 6 knots. The patrol boat closed to 300 yards. The Japanese gunner was finding his range. The next burst would be fatal. Then Q-111 entered the shallows. Water depth dropped from 60 feet to 15 feet. The fishing boat's 4-foot draft allowed passage. The patrol boat drew 8 feet. The Japanese commander had 2 choices: follow and risk grounding or break off pursuit. He chose to break off. The patrol boat turned away. Q-111 continued into the shallows. The engine was overheating but still running. The boat had survived. Jamis reached Cebu at 4:30 on April 19th. 1 Japanese freighter sunk. 0 casualties. The fishing boat was damaged but repairable. The mission was a success. The first success for the converted torpedo boats. The first proof that the insane idea could work. Commander Andrada was vindicated. Bulkley was impressed. The Philippine Navy ordered 4 more conversions immediately. Over the next 6 weeks, the converted fishing boats attacked Japanese shipping across the central Philippines. The results were remarkable. Q-112 sank a troop transport off Negros on April 22nd. Q-114 damaged a tanker near Mindanao on April 27th. Q-115 sank a freighter in Leyte Gulf on May 3rd. The success rate was approximately 60%. 6 attacks. 3 ships sunk. 2 ships damaged. 1 attack failed when the torpedo malfunctioned. But the cost was high. Q-113 was sunk by a Japanese destroyer on April 25th. All 8 crew members died. Q-116 was destroyed by aircraft on May 1st. 5 crew killed, 3 wounded. Q-118 disappeared on May 8th. Presumed sunk, no survivors. The attrition rate was 40%. 4 boats destroyed in 6 weeks. 8 more boats remained operational, but the crews understood the mathematics. Every mission reduced the odds of survival. The Japanese called the fishing boat torpedo attacks kamikaze tactics, suicide attacks. Japanese intelligence identified the boats as converted civilian vessels operated by Philippine Navy personnel. Japanese commanders issued orders to destroy all fishing boats on site. Civilian fishing ceased across the central Philippines. Thousands of fishermen lost their livelihoods. Coastal villages faced starvation. The Japanese didn't care. They needed to stop the torpedo attacks. The nickname suicide skippers spread through Japanese forces. Radio intercepts confirmed Japanese troops feared the fishing boat attacks more than PT boat attacks. PT boats were fast and could escape. Fishing boats were slow and would die fighting. The Japanese respected courage even in their enemies. The suicide skippers had courage. They also had nothing to lose. The Philippines was falling. The fishing boat crews chose to die fighting rather than surrender. By June 1942, the strategic situation had collapsed completely. Bataan had fallen in April. Corregidor surrendered in May. American and Filipino forces throughout the Philippines were surrendering or retreating to the mountains to fight as guerrillas. The Philippine Navy ceased to exist as an organized force. The fishing boat torpedo boats dispersed to hidden coves across the islands. Some continued operations as independent units. Some were scuttled to prevent Japanese capture. Some disappeared without record. Q-111 survived until June 14, 1942. Lieutenant Jamis attacked a Japanese convoy near Panay. The torpedo hit a freighter but failed to sink it. Japanese patrol boats pursued Q-111 into shallow water. This time, the Japanese followed. They grounded their patrol boat but close enough to engage with gunfire. Q-111 was hit multiple times. The diesel engine exploded. The boat caught fire. Jamis ordered the crew to abandon ship. 6 crew members escaped. 2 died. Jamis was among the survivors. The surviving crew members swam to shore and disappeared into the jungle. Jamis joined guerrilla forces operating in the mountains. He fought for 3 more years, survived the war, was promoted to commander. After the war, he served in the Philippine Navy until retirement in 1965. He never forgot his crew, never forgot Q-111, never forgot the insane idea that actually worked. Chief Torpedo Man Martino remained in the Philippines throughout the war. He maintained torpedo boats for guerrilla forces, improvised weapons from salvaged equipment, trained Filipino sailors in torpedo maintenance. He was captured by Japanese forces in October 1942, survived 3 years as a prisoner of war, liberated in 1945, returned to the United States, retired from the Navy in 1952. He kept detailed notes on the fishing boat conversions. Those notes survived and reside in the Naval History and Heritage Command archives. Commander Andrada evacuated to Australia in May 1942. He served with Philippine Naval Forces for the remainder of the war. After the war, he became Chief of Naval Operations for the Philippine Navy, retired in 1955. He always maintained that the fishing boat torpedo boats were his most successful innovation. Desperate circumstances required desperate solutions. The fishing boats worked because they had to work. Lieutenant Commander Bulkley evacuated General MacArthur from Corregidor in March 1942. His PT boat made the famous run to Mindanao. Bulkley received the Medal of Honor, returned to the United States, trained new PT boat crews, served in the Navy until retirement in 1988 as a Vice Admiral. He always said the Philippine fishing boat torpedo boats were braver than any PT boat crew he ever commanded. PT boats could run away. The fishing boats could not. They fought knowing they would probably die. That was real courage. The total number of fishing boats converted to torpedo boats remains uncertain. Official Philippine Navy records list 12 boats. American records list 16. Guerrilla force records suggest as many as 20 boats may have been converted. Many conversions were done independently by isolated units with no central coordination. Some boats operated for weeks without official oversight. Some attacked Japanese shipping and were never documented. The exact number will never be known. What is known is the combat record. Between April and August 1942, Philippine fishing boat torpedo boats sank at least 8 Japanese ships, damaged at least 6 more. The ships ranged from 500-ton freighters to 3,000-ton transports. Total tonnage sunk exceeded 15,000 tons. Total cargo lost included ammunition, fuel, food, and reinforcements intended for Japanese forces throughout the Philippines. The impact on Japanese logistics was significant. The cost was equally significant. At least 9 fishing boat torpedo boats were destroyed. Minimum 40 crew members killed. Additional crew members wounded or captured. The attrition rate exceeded 50%. No other naval force in World War II sustained such losses while remaining operational. The crews knew the odds. They attacked anyway. Japanese forces eventually adapted their tactics. Convoys began traveling only during daylight when aircraft could provide cover. Ships traveled closer to shore, where shallow water prevented torpedo attacks. Patrol boats increased anti-small craft patrols. The combination of tactics reduced fishing boat effectiveness. By September 1942, successful attacks became rare. The fishing boat torpedo boats had served their purpose. They had disrupted Japanese logistics during the critical period when the Philippines fell. They had proven that courage and innovation could partially compensate for lack of resources. The fishing boat torpedo boats represented improvisation at its most desperate. Convert civilian fishing boats into warships. Arm them with torpedoes designed for completely different vessels. Crew them with sailors who understood the mission was probably suicide. Attack superior forces at night using boats that could not escape if detected. The concept violated every principle of naval warfare. It worked anyway. The innovation succeeded for 3 reasons. First, necessity. The Philippines had no other naval forces available. The fishing boats were the only option. Second, Japanese vulnerability. The supply convoys were lightly defended and predictably routed. They offered targets that even slow boats could attack. Third, crew determination. The Philippine sailors understood they were fighting for their homeland. Surrender was not acceptable. Death in combat was preferable to defeat without fighting. Modern naval warfare has no equivalent to the fishing boat torpedo boats. Contemporary naval forces do not convert civilian vessels to warships. The practice violates international law regarding armed merchant vessels and perfidy. Military vessels must be clearly marked, must follow rules of engagement, cannot disguise themselves as civilian craft. The fishing boat torpedo boats operated under different rules. Total war, desperate circumstances, victory or death. But the fundamental lesson remains relevant. When resources are limited, innovation becomes essential. When conventional forces are inadequate, unconventional methods must be attempted. The fishing boat torpedo boats proved that effectiveness matters more than design purity. A slow fishing boat that sank enemy ships was more valuable than a fast PT boat with no torpedoes. Results justified methods. The crew's willingness to accept extreme risk demonstrated commitment that modern military forces struggle to replicate. Volunteer forces in democratic nations generally avoid suicide missions. Professional militaries emphasize force protection, minimize casualties, preserve combat power for future operations. The fishing boat crews had no future operations to preserve strength for. They had one chance to hurt the enemy. They took it knowing they would probably die. Japanese respect for the suicide skippers was genuine. Captured Philippine sailors reported Japanese interrogators expressing admiration for their courage. Japanese officers compared the fishing boat crews to samurai, warriors who accepted death to accomplish their mission. The comparison was culturally specific, but the respect was universal. Courage transcends nationality. Enemies can recognize honor in those they fight. After the war, the Philippine government recognized the fishing boat torpedo boat crews with various decorations. The exact number of awards remains unclear because many crew members died without official documentation. Records were destroyed during the war. Witnesses were scattered. Some crews operated independently and were never officially recognized. The bureaucracy of military awards could not accommodate the chaos of desperate improvisation. No fishing boat torpedo boats survived the war. All were destroyed in combat, scuttled to prevent capture, or scrapped after the war ended. No physical evidence of the conversions remains except photographs, a few grainy images showing fishing boats with torpedo tubes mounted on their bows. The photographs look absurd, fishing boats pretending to be warships, but those absurd boats sank real Japanese ships, killed real Japanese sailors, delayed real Japanese operations. The story of the fishing boat torpedo boats has been largely forgotten. Military histories focus on major battles, large fleets, decisive engagements. The fishing boats were none of those things. They were a footnote, a desperate improvisation during the chaotic fall of the Philippines. But their story matters because it demonstrates principles that transcend specific circumstances. Innovation matters. When conventional solutions are unavailable, unconventional solutions must be attempted. The fishing boat conversions were technically absurd but tactically sound. They worked because the people who built them made them work. Courage matters. The fishing boat crews volunteered for missions they knew were probably suicide. They attacked anyway because they believed the mission was worth the sacrifice. Modern military forces call that kind of courage exceptional. The fishing boat crews considered it duty. Results matter. The fishing boats sank Japanese ships, disrupted Japanese logistics, forced Japanese tactical changes. Those results came from fishing boats that could barely move, from crews that had minimal training, from torpedoes mounted on improvised mounts. The boats were ridiculous. The results were real. The Japanese called them suicide skippers. The name was accurate. The crews accepted suicide missions, attacked knowing they probably would not return, died fighting impossible odds. Their courage deserves to be remembered. Their innovation deserves to be studied. Their sacrifice deserves to be honored. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about Filipino sailors who turned fishing boats into torpedo ships. Real people, real courage, real sacrifice. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Thank you for making sure the suicide skippers don't disappear into silence. These men proved that courage and innovation can overcome impossible odds. Impossible odds. Impossible odds.